This lesson is titled Point Slope Form. In point slope form, we have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. M is always the slope. So when you see an m, we're thinking slope. x1, y1 is just a point on the line. So it's any point on the line. x1, comma, y1. We're going to use this formula quite a bit, so you might want to scribble it down in your notes or on whatever scratch paper you're using to go through the lesson. Remember, you can pause, rewind, fast forward, whatever you need to do to pace this lesson so it works for you. In this example, we're going to write an equation in point slope form, so they're asking for that specific form for the line through the given point that has the given slope. Well, the slope is negative 5/3 and the point is 4, 2. So remember, this value is an x1, this value is a y1. So we're just going to plug into the formula y minus y1 equals the slope times x minus x1. So from here, let's just plug in values. We have y minus, the y1 value is 2, is equal to the slope, which is negative 5/3, times the quantity x minus x1. The x1 value is 4. And that's it. We're done right here. There's our equation of a line in point slope form. In this example, we're going to do the same thing. Notice that our x1 value is 0, our y1 value is 2, and our slope is 4/5. So y minus y1 is 2 equals our slope 4/5 times the quantity x minus x1, which is 0. Now I probably wouldn't leave my answer like this. I would go ahead and simplify the x minus 0 and end with y minus 2 is equal to 4/5 x. But that might be confusing for some people because it's hard to see the point slope form. It's hard to see the other point, the x coordinate. So we'll take either one of these in my class. Here's another example. This time we just have 2 points. We don't have that slope. Well, remember there's a thing called the slope formula. M is equal to the second y value minus the first y value, all divided by the second x value minus the first x value. Let's go ahead and look at what we're looking at up here. We've got, this is an x, this is a y, this is a second x, and this is a second y. So let's go ahead and mark these as first x and first y. So we can find the slope by plugging in our little formula here. So slope is equal to second y is 2 minus first y is 0 over second x is 1 minus first x, that's a negative 1, so we have to be careful with our arithmetic here. 2 minus 0, 2. 1 minus a negative 1 is also 2. 2 over 2 is 1. So we have a slope of 1. Then we'll go ahead and write our line. Let's use this point because we can see an x and a y. So I've got y minus y2 is equal to the slope, which is 1. We can write the 1 or not write the 1 here. But let's write it so it's clear to anybody reading it. Times the quantity x minus x1. Now again, you might not write this value right here. This 1, you might just write y2 equals x minus 1. And I think a lot of people would do it that way. Here's another example where we've got just the 2 points. And notice this time we have to deal with a negative. We haven't seen one of those yet in a point. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's find our slope. Our slope is equal to our second y value is 1 minus our first y value is 6 over our second x value is 5 minus our first x value is negative 2. I guess we did deal with the negative on the previous slide. Alright, let's see. 1 minus 6 is negative 5, and 5 minus a negative 2 is 7. So there's my slope. Now I pick a point to work with. I'm gonna work with this one because it's got all positives. It's a little easier to work with. So I've got y minus the y value in the point equals the slope, negative 5/7, times the quantity x minus the x value, and my point is 5. Make sure you work with the same point all the way through when you get to this step. Don't take an x value from one point and a y value from another point. That won't work. Another example. Notice all the negatives here. Let's just power through here. We've got slope is equal to second y value is negative 6 minus first y value is negative 5. That's all divided by second x, negative 7, minus first x, which is negative 1. Let's see, my numerator gives me negative 6 minus the negative 5 is negative 1, and my denominator gives me negative 6 minus the negative 1, or excuse me, negative 7 minus the negative 1 is negative 6. That is 1/6. Negative divided by a negative is positive. So let's go ahead and use the first point. Y minus a negative 5, we're going to clean this up in the next line, is equal to our slope 1/6 times the quantity x minus negative 1. Let's clean up the double negatives here in the next line. Y double negative is positive equals 1/6 times the quantity x double negative is positive. So we have x plus 1. And that's our final answer. Y plus 5 equals 1/6 times x plus 1. We can check this by plugging the other point in. Let's put in negative 7 mentally. Negative 7 plus 5. Actually, that needs to go for the x, doesn't it? Negative 7 plus 1 is negative 6 times 1/6 comes out to negative 1. If I plug the negative 6 in for the y, negative 6 plus 5 is also negative 1. Negative 1 does equal negative 1, so that checks. My answer has to be right. Here's one for you to try. So go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can walk through one of these where you're just given 2 points and you need to come up with the equation of the line in point-slope form. Alright, I would find the slope first. So I've got my second y value minus my first y value, negative 4 minus 7, over my second x value minus my first x value. Make sure you always start with the same point here and end with the same point here. If you don't, if you mix that up, it's going to cause problems. So I've got what, negative 11 over negative 1, which would reduce to just plain old 11. Let's go ahead and use the first point when we write our equation because everything's positive. It's a little easier to work with. I won't have that double negative to deal with. So I've got y minus 7 is equal to 11 times the quantity x minus 2. Now, you may have chosen the other point to work with at this point, and that's okay. So let's see what that answer would have been. If you'd have chosen this point to work with instead, you'd have y minus a negative 4, which is y plus 4, in the final answer, equals the same slope 11 times the quantity x minus 1. So depending on which point you chose, you're going to get one of these answers. You only need to have one of them. We don't need to do both. Alright, this one's going to ask us to do a couple of equations. We're doing 2 equations. One's going to be in point-slope form, which is the form we've been dealing with, and one's in standard form. Okay, standard form is ax plus by equals c. It's a little more difficult to get to standard form, but there's a method that we can use that makes it slightly easier. So let's go ahead and do the point-slope form. Our slope, we need that first, is equal to 1 minus 4 over negative 1 minus 1 What's that give me? Negative 3 over negative 2, which is 3/2. So if I use this point, I would have y minus y1 equals 3/2 times the quantity x minus x1. So here's one of the answers they asked for was point slope form. We've got that one. And they also asked for standard form. There's a couple of ways to get to standard form. My favorite is just to take the slope and use it to get to standard form instead of doing all the algebra to rewrite this one. So I know that in standard form the slope is equal to the opposite of the a value divided by the b value. And I have a slope of 3/2, which means the a value is 3 and the b value is 2, and I just have to deal with the opposite, and I always deal with the opposite right here in the middle. So the a value is 3, so I have 3x. The b value is 2, I have 2y. And I let the opposite happen right here in the middle. So this is a positive value, the whole slope, so I want to have a negative here. So notice if I take the opposite of a, I get negative 3 over negative 2. That does equal the same 3/2 right here. Now I just need to figure out this c value. The c value I'm going to get by plugging in the point. So I'm going to put in 1 for x, 3 times 1, minus, I'm going to put in this 4 for y, 2 times 4, and see what I get. This is going to be 3 minus 8, which is the same as negative 5. So the c value has to be negative 5, because when I plug in 1 and 4, that's what I get. A quick check on this standard form, I should get the same negative 5 if I plug in negative 1 and 1. Negative 3 minus 2 is also negative 5, so that checks. So here's my point slope form, here's my standard form. Here's another example doing the same thing. I need point slope form and standard form. So let's find the slope. We need the slope for either form. We're going to take second y value, which is negative 3, minus first y value, which is also negative 3. Interesting thing going to happen there. Over second x value, which is negative 2, minus first x value, which is 6. My numerator zeroes out. Negative 3 minus negative 3 is 0. My denominator is negative 8. So my slope is 0. Therefore, my equation in point slope form, y minus y1, let's go ahead and use the first point. It's going to be y minus negative 3 would be plus 3 equals 0 times the quantity x minus 6. Well, 0 times anything is 0, so this whole thing is just y plus 3 equals 0, which is the same as y equals negative 3. This is how I would write my answer for both forms. This is a simple equation. It's a horizontal line at a height of y equals negative 3 all the way across. And if we were smart, we would have seen that right here. The y value is always negative 3, so we could just take that answer and write an equation if we see that next time. The y value is always negative 3. If you see the x value match, it's the same thing, and the x value is always whatever that is. So some people might be a stickler and they'd want to see that for standard form, and maybe this for they want to see this for point slope form. They want to see this for standard form, but I would just prefer you simplify to that for this whole question. Another example, we're going through 0, 0, and 1, 2. So this slope ought to be easier to calculate because we're just dealing with some zeros here. So I've got negative 2 minus 0, and I've got negative 1 minus 0. So I'm going to end up with negative 2 over negative 1, which is positive 2. So my equation, y, let's use that 0, 0 point, y minus 0 equals my slope, 2 times quantity x minus 0. Well, let's clean this up a little bit. That's y equals 2x. Now to put this into standard form, it's probably just going to be easier to use this equation and manipulate it because it's a pretty simple equation. Let's go ahead and just subtract 2x from both sides, so I get negative 2x plus y equals 0. And when I'm in standard form, I like my a value to be positive, so I'm going to multiply everything by negative 1 and get 2x minus y is equal to 0. And that's where I would stop for standard form. Here's another example. Why don't you try this one? Go ahead and pause the video and give this a try. You've been seeing a lot of these. It's time for you to do some math here. Alright, hopefully you just zero it in on these guys. Y is always 2, and you're done. That's it. Try this one. Alright, let's find a slope. Hopefully this is exactly what you did. If you haven't done this, go ahead and pause and give it a try anyway. 3 minus 6 and 3 minus a negative 6. Three minus 6 is negative 3. 3 minus a negative 6 is 9. That'll reduce to negative 1/3. So my slope is negative 1/3. Let's use the point with all positives in it. So we'll go y minus 3 equals negative 1/3 times the quantity x minus 3. And there's our point slope form. Now let's go ahead and do standard form. Standard form says my slope is negative 1/3. So that my a is 1, so I've got 1x. I'm just going to write x. My b is 3. I've got 3y. And that equals some c value. This is a negative slope, so the opposite would be positive. If I want to find the c value, I just plug in an x for the x, a y for the y, and let's see what we get. I get 3 plus 3 times 3, or 3 plus 9, which is 12. So my c value is 12. Let's check that with the other point. If I put in a negative 6 and put in a 6, I get negative 6 plus 18, which is also 12. So that works out really well. Here's one for you to try. Go ahead and give this a try. And when you're ready to check your answer, press play. Alright, here we go. Slope. Second y minus first y. 5 minus 3. Second x minus first x. Negative 1 minus 2. Numerator is going to give me 2. Denominator is going to give me negative 3. So my slope is negative 2/3. So I have y minus the y value, let's use the positive point here, 3, equals negative 2/3 times the quantity x minus the x value, which is 2. So there's our point slope form. Let's go ahead and do standard form. Ax plus by, so I've got a 2x, I've got a 3y, equals, we don't know yet. This is negative, so the opposite would be positive. Let's put in the 2 and the 3 and see what we get. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 3 times 3 is 9. That's going to be 13. Let's check that with the other point. That'd be negative 2 and 15. That also equals 13 when you add them together. So we're good. That's our learning target for this lesson. I'll see you in class.